It's been 4 explosive days in the High Court in Pretoria. A friend of the late Senzo Meyiwa has been on the stand giving his perspective on what happened on the night of 2014 when the soccer player was shot dead. The matter has now been postponed to the 8th of May on account of accused number 1 and 2's lawyer feeling under the weather. Let's go to eNCA's Manqoba Mchunu, who's been following proceedings for us, and he joins us now live. So Manqoba, a little earlier on today, the cross-examination by accused number 1 and 2's legal representative had started. What then happened?
Well, Masiko, we did start with cross-examination today. Of course, you recall that Advocate Sipora Mosipelo, who was representing accused 1 and 2, had started his cross-examination yesterday. So he picked off where he had left off yesterday by, asking on the events that happened on the 26th of October, the day that Senzo Meyiwa was shot and killed, and just what happened just moments before that shooting happened. Recall that Thwala had alluded to the fact that they had gone to Kelly Khumalo's house and they had a supper there, and just before they had then decided to leave and go back or perhaps go to a party that they'd wanted to attend. This is when the intruders had then come inside the house and demanded cell phones and money, and then shot Senzo Meyiwa in a scuffle that had ensued on that day. And of course, we heard Ramosipile asking Thwala about the events leading up to the shooting, the scuffle that ensued before that shooting occurred, and exactly the point when these intruders had then walked into the house, and what did he see when these intruders had walked into the house. I think one of the questions that Ramosipile had asked was whether the doors were locked at the time, whether burglar guards locked when these intruders had come into the house, to which Thwala had responded that he didn't recall whether this was the case, but what he saw was just one of these intruders just moments after they had come into the house. This is after Tumelo Madlala and Mthosi Thwala had gone outside the house where Tumelo Madlala had been going to smoke at that particular point, and upon their return with Senzo Meyiwa, who had come to fetch them, this is when this incident had then occurred. He says he just heard somebody in the kitchen, and he heard somebody demanding cell phones and money. He could not make out exactly where the second intruder was at that particular point, but what he says is that when they first saw the intruders that were inside the house, they thought that this perhaps was one of the neighbors that had come into the house. But take a listen to what he had to say exactly about this particular point.
Your story is that the first intruder to enter the house carried a firearm or a gun, correct?
Angithi usho ke ubufakazi bakho ukuthi owoqala owangena endlini wayephethe isibhamu.
Yebo.
Yes.
And from your vantage point where you were seated, could you see that firearm as soon as that person enters the kitchen?
Kwindawo wawuhlezi kuyona ingabe leso sibhamu leso wasibona nje kanye ngenkathi nje umbona noma lo muntu engena ekitchen?
Hayi ukuthi ngasibona ngesikhathi engena. Mina ngabona ukuthi ushuka umuntu la lo mnyango lo, ukuthi lo ade ngisho lo ungakusona umnyango, I think it's like uphumele passage. Ngikhumbula ukuthi ngabuka uSenzo, ngitshe mhlawumbe mina umuntu omakhelwane or something, angazi namhlanje ngicabangiswa yini lokho.
Not that I saw a person coming into the kitchen door. You remember there's this opening that I described here. It's not a door, it's an opening where I just saw someone appearing from there. And then I looked at Senzo because I was under this impression that maybe it's a neighbor. And I also don't know why I thought like that.
And then emva kwesikhathi esincane nje futhi ngibuka uSenzo ila ngathi mengibuka khona ngabona ukuthi hayibo lo muntu uphethe isibhamu.
Okay. And after a short while, while looking at Senzo, that's when I then saw that, but this person has got a firearm.
And Manqoba, he also touched on the relationship with Longwe Thwala. What did he say? What kind of relationship did those in the house have with Thwala, besides the fact that Kelly Khumalo's sister was the girlfriend?
Well, that's exactly what, the defense lawyers were trying to ascertain whether or not Thwala had known Longa Thwala prior to the 26th of October when this shooting had occurred. And his response in court was that this was the first time that he had met Longa Thwala. He had not known him before that. And in fact, he says that when Longa Thwala arrived in the house, he doesn't recall whether he even greeted the people that were inside the house. He was asked whether he did converse at all with Longa Thwala on that particular day, and his response was that there was not much of a chit-chatting that had had with Longa Thwala. There was not much of talking that they did with Longa Thwala. Of course, only when he had responded to some of the discussions that had been taking place in the house. The only information he was told by Senzo Meyiwa was that Longa Thwala was in fact the boyfriend of Zandile Thwala. So he says that there was no relationship. He had not known Longa Thwala ever since until this incident had occurred. And of course, it is important, this question, Maseko, given that you recall that yesterday we heard from the state, which was, essentially correcting some of the inconsistencies in the testimony that Thwala had given in court, Thwala, that being as well as what he had reported to police back in 2014. And one of the issues that had come up is the issue around Longa Thwala and whether Thwala was involved in that scuffle that ensued. According to the testimony that Thwala had given in court, Longa Thwala had pushed his way out. He managed to escape from those intruders. But in his initial statement, he had indicated that Longa Thwala had in fact let go of the firearm from one of the intruders that had come into the house. So this is the reason why I think he was quizzed around his relationship with Longa Thwala and whether or not he did know Longa Thwala. But of course his responses were that this was the first time that he had met Longa Thwala, and of course he also repeated the fact that Longa Thwala had ran outside the house through intruders, ultimately running away from the scene. But take a listen to how that went on in court.
Now, Longwe arrives, he sits where you have pointed out in the exhibit. I'm not going to regurgitate that again. Have you previously met Longa Thwala before the date of the 26th of October 2014?
Wasefika ke uLongwe wahlala kuyena le ndawo oyikhombileka ngeke ngiyiphindeke ngabe ngaphambilini kwaleli langa la nge-26 ka-October 2014 wake wahlangana naye uLongwe. No, never. That was I was seeing him for the first time.
All right, Manqoba Mchunu live for us outside the High Court in Pretoria. Let's leave it there for now. The case has been postponed to next week, Monday.